first off, thank you for joining us. Robin Tong, I'm a KPMG partner. I am the Canadian Prairie's Technology Risk and Cyber Leader. So it is my pleasure today to welcome you to BSides. Today we're going to be discussing ransomware and cyber attacks. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to, we have a little bit of change of program. I was supposed to be a moderator, but I think I'm actually going to hand over this important duties to my colleague, Ganesh Ramakrishnan from our cyber incident response practice in GTA. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ganesh. So just before that, this is intended to be a panel. We want it to be interactive. So if I'm going to be holding this mic here, and at any point in time, if you have any questions for our panelists, please just raise your hands. I'll come over, making sure that you have the mic, then everyone can hear you, and then make this as interactive as possible. How's that? Okay, awesome. Over to you.
Thanks, Robin, and good morning, everyone. My name is Ganesh. I'm from Toronto, but I lead the incident response team for KPMG Canada. And then I'm going to quickly hand it over to the panel over here, maybe one round of introduction from everyone. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks, Ganesh. Yeah, Alexander Rao. I am a partner at KPMG. Together with Ganesh, we lead the cyber incident response team for KPMG here in Canada. And as we are here, you are the people you don't want to talk to, right, when from a cybersecurity perspective, because we deal with a lot of sort of firefighting when SHIT hits the fan, unfortunately. So I've been with KPMG for 3 years. I was with Mandiant 5 years prior to that. And yeah, we had some interesting couple of years and changes in the threat landscape. And threats and attacks are continuing to happen, and unfortunately clients have to call us, and they call any one of us. And with that, Jason, want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Jason Codler. I'm the president and founder of Cypher. We're a cyber extortion, a ransomware emergency response team. I founded the company 3.5 years ago just doing ransomware and cyber extortion negotiations and intelligence gathering and responses. We've since grown to over 100 people in UK, North America, Caribbean, and we also do incident response, doing recovery remediation. Sometimes that's the alternative to not paying. I've seen exponential growth, unfortunately, in this business. Given the types of attack vectors that are changing, the innovation of threat actors, and the fact that they're going after tech companies and others who are targets for a number of reasons we'll talk about today. So our team's role is basically engaging with the threat actors and trying to get the data back and trying to get decryptors, and unfortunately paying them cryptocurrency to do so.
Hi, David Krebs, partner with Miller Thompson, national law firm. We've got office in Edmonton, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. I'm based out of Saskatoon, but I lead the national sort of privacy and cyber group. And yeah, I work with sort of these gentlemen and others on these issues because there's also legal ramifications oftentimes of being a victim, unfortunately, which is one of the rare cases where you're a victim and then you're, the bad guy, all in one swoop, potentially. And so, yeah, so I'm a breach coach and I advise on sort of legal notification. Sometimes it gets to litigation as well, unfortunately. We can talk a little bit more about that, but yeah, nice to be here.
Hey everyone, my name's Nick Hickey. I am Cyber Services Manager of Canada for Beasley. Beasley is a cyber insurer. So we help clients, get cyber insurance, get prepared for a cyber attack. In the event that they do have a cyber attack, we'll help you remediate it and get you out of that cyber attack through the use of vendors like KPMG and Cypher. Prior to working for Beasley, I worked for the Federal Court of Canada. I did IT cybersecurity engineering work for them in a top secret environment. So plenty of experience from a technical point of view, and happy to be here today. So thank you.
Welcome you all. So my first question is for all of you as well. Maybe quick perspective from forensics, ransom negotiation, legal, and insurance. What's the current trend around ransomware? What cyber threats you are seeing, and what should everybody be aware about?
I guess I start. From a ransomware or from an incident perspective, first of all, we've seen a big dip over the summer from threat actors sort of taking time off, we assume. to enjoy the summer, which usually, it comes in cycles. I guess you guys can probably validate that. So summers are usually slow, but there are the odd cases. And I guess for us, it was sort of a 50-50 ransomware or business email compromise, right? Business email compromise where threat actors trying to intercept email communication and misdirect or redirect funds into different accounts. And yes, that happens. We just had a case, $350,000 were sent to another country and the client actually paid, right? So, and then we're called in to analyze how it happened and what could be done differently the next time. So from a ransom perspective, we've seen smaller ransom groups, unknown ransom groups, and maybe with that, Jason, you can comment on that.
Yeah, so it has been quiet. One of the largest groups called Lockbit, you may have heard them. They've been involved in a number of Canadian incidents. Self-professed that they were going on vacation for about 6 or 8 weeks. They weren't answering the phones. They dropped negotiations midway through. You couldn't get tech support. And the operator, when he came back to the office, said he had an inbox with 150 responses he needed to get to, and he would over time. These guys are the most rapacious, most active group. They went from hundreds a month to down to 0 in terms of exploits. But in terms of the groups that we're seeing, there's been a resurgence because this last quarter is usually the biggest. Going into Christmas, going into the Orthodox Russian holidays in January, we'll see tons and tons of cases happen. And I'll get into some of the stats in a moment. They're basically going after organizations that are $50 to $100 million in size, but there are also a bunch of small ones. The more organized ransomware as a service groups try to hit these whales all the way up to billion-dollar companies. And there was another recent exploit called CLOP. It was a Move It platform. It's a file share transfer, probably one of the largest thefts of data and number of victims impacted, over 300 our last count. So that has been happening. We're all getting ready for another wave. In terms of some stats, we see the average ransom cyber extortion demand in US dollars around $3.16 million. We're negotiating, and we see companies at all different levels, from small, medium enterprise all the way to billion-dollar operations, publicly traded. The average payments that we're paying out is probably around $750,000 to $1 million. If you asked me this about a year ago, it would have been around $500,000. So it's getting up, it's getting to larger percentages of their gross revenues. That's how they equate it. And we're seeing demands that used to be, let's say, in the tens of millions. We've seen 50, 80, 100, 150, $175 million US demands. And if that's somewhere between 20 basis points on a billion-dollar company up to 5%, and Lockbit, this group that went on holiday, they just refreshed all their rules. So companies are not going to be able to get away with less than 0.5% all the way up to 7 or 10% for smaller companies. And they're not going to give as high discounts anymore. They're standardizing across the board. They're only going to give 50%. So when you're faced with a $100 million demand, you got to look at a $50 million US payment. Just a couple more stats. Most attacked country has been the US, but very, very close after that is UK, Canada, Australia, and Europe. US obviously is the largest, like thousands of cases a year, but we've seen a lot of activity in Australia. And then lastly, in terms of the types of services, professional services, about 23% of businesses that are victims, financial services, 12%, tech hardware, the kind of businesses you guys may be in, about 11%, manufacturing 11%, and then healthcare, unfortunately, 9%.
Wow.
Yeah, those are interesting stats. I mean, I don't know if I have a lot more to add on that front. I think I can echo that we've also seen a little bit of a downturn, and I guess I always think that's a good thing for our clients because I end up handling a lot of these cases for our existing clients at Miller Thomson. And what I have seen is that there's usually a wave of ransomware, and then there's a wave of business email compromise sort of after that, and you can wonder why that is. Maybe data was taken during a ransomware, and then that's used for BEC. But ultimately, I think one thing that I've noticed over the last little while is that clients are becoming a little bit more aware that a ransomware situation is not just an extortion to get your business back up and running to get the decryptors, it's really, it might be a reportable privacy breach as well. So I think that was a few years ago. There's a little bit more of a, no, wait a minute, this isn't a data breach, this is just sort of, a ransomware attack, and we're going to, get the decryptors or recover from backups, and that's it. Now I think people are aware of, you might have a reportable breach, and, we'll get into that a little bit later. Alberta obviously is one of those jurisdictions where you have mandatory breach notification. But yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else to really add to those trends.
Maybe Nick?
Could quickly add something in. So from the cyber insurance perspective, we see thousands of claims a year. And last year I noticed there was a correlation between the ransom demand and the revenue of the company. So ransom would essentially make up a percentage of the revenue. Low, generally, 1 to 3%, 3% being on the higher. Now, as Jason mentioned, with some of these new groups, they're a lot more brutal. Also, public revenues aren't as noted anymore. So if you're going for a smaller company whose public revenue might not be known, you can see a company making $6 million in revenue hit with a $5 million demand, which, if you don't have cyber insurance and if you don't have insurance to cover that, your backups aren't up and running, everything's encrypted, you might go out of business. So the ransom demands are completely sort of sporadic right now. Groups are getting a lot more brutal as well. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly.
Oh yeah, and sorry, one thing that I did want to add, which was a bit peculiar for me this year, is that we saw a few more threat actors just walk away. Ransom note, and then that's it. And for the client, you're in a really odd position because you don't know what's coming down the pike. Are you done? Are you not done? What sort of issue do you have? And that was something that was a little bit more prevalent. I don't know if you found that, but that was something that popped up more this year.
That kind of reminds me of a couple of years where we were working on a case where they were gotten taken down, and we didn't know if they're going to ever get a decryptor after whether or not the negotiation is going to be successful. Quick question for Jason, just out of curiosity. What's the maximum ever ransom demand was, and what's the minimum that somebody ever asked?
Maximum demands, we've seen 150, $175 million US. These are, multi-billion-dollar companies. I'd like to say that we're good negotiators, but in those cases, the maximum we've paid out is $30 million US, and I've done that a few times.
Very interesting.
We had an $80 million, we got it down to 3.5, 4. So, it all depends on the situation. Do you have immutable backups? Is the data they stole that concerning the business? What's the impact? I'd really like to tell these guys to go stick it, but sometimes you got to think, and we'll talk about a little bit later, the reasons to pay or not to pay, but it's very fact-specific to the organization and their reasons for whether or not they are going to engage, negotiate, and ultimately settle.
Like, if you want to continue on it, pay or not to pay, we have noticed over the last little while, clients that are getting hit by ransomware, their first instinct is, I just want to pay and I just want to move on with my business. So they don't even ask anymore, should I or should I not pay? Like, obviously, if they think or they should pay, there's other repercussions or other decision points they have to take into consideration. But that's what I'm seeing more and more. They just want to get the incident out of the way and just move on with life.
One quick thing to note too is about payments. Oftentimes companies will think, oh, it's a simple, we'll make a $3 million payment and we'll be back up and running in 2-3 days. It's not as simple as that. Technology is getting way more complicated. Systems are getting more integrated and connected that, sometimes companies do get the decryptor tool, they go to decrypt and the data is corrupted too, right? So you're only getting back maybe 50-60% of what you previously had. So big emphasis on things you can do to prevent this, like backups, immutable backups, and 50 other things that you should have in place as well.
Yeah, that's a big change now, because what you're getting is these ransomware as a service toolkits, and the guy hacking doesn't necessarily have the skills, but they've been given, a dashboard and a back end, and they can toggle and they can run these scripts, but they don't know when they're in proprietary systems what it is they've done. They don't even necessarily know what's production versus archive versus active or backup. And the problem is that when they break connections to things, or they're in environments where they don't have the best tool, so they have Linux and ESXi, but it hasn't been tested at the level or debugged at the level of a Microsoft and they break things, we're finding that we've got to get our incident response teams in faster to assess whether the recovery can even happen. Why go and negotiate and be handed a decryptor that's going to have 10 or 20% data validation on stuff that isn't going to be critical, isn't valuable to the business? And the sooner we know if we can do proof of decryption and an assessment to see if there's corruption, the better off I am as a negotiator. We may not want anything at all. And there are times where we've bought things where it's been Swiss cheese and it had no effect and no value.
I was wondering, when somebody in an industry pays a ransom, does that kind of paint a target on everybody? Like, you see maybe a big hotel got hacked, that, oh, hotels are going to be really, hot for ransomware groups, better watch out? Or is it just still kind of random as to wherever?
I think I'll take that. So it is a bit of a crime of opportunity. Like, if you left your back door open in your house and someone sees that it's unlocked, they're going to come in. There are groups that want to target sectors because they know, based on the nature of the data or the businesses they have, that they're going to have a higher propensity to want to pay or have to pay if it was medical information or a critical service or a casino that they're losing billions of dollars potentially. I don't have any direct experience with those cases, but I can say that certain sectors, like I said with the stats, like finance, they have the money, you go where the money is. Does it paint a target? It paints a target if the whole sector doesn't increase their level of protection. So you got to spend money, you got to protect. Could they be retargeted? Likely not. They're going to move on. Do we continue to promulgate if we pay, it's going to fund more crime? Yes, it's a concern. We always have to think about the larger picture, but the problem is, that was raised earlier, you've got an existential problem. Your business is going to operate today or not recover tomorrow. Like, what do you do? And you can't think about necessarily, the greater good, because you have a lot of people whose jobs and businesses rely on this. So I don't think they're going to necessarily paint a target, but it's a good business and they're going to continue to do it.
There's another question.
You guys mentioned the big wave that's coming. Is there any correlation between cryptocurrencies prices and the ransomware attacks that are coming out? I know it's a bear market at the moment for cryptocurrencies, and in cybersecurity, I kind of noticed that there were more attacks when Bitcoin was super high versus right now when it's low.
I've been in all the cycles now, winter, summer, whatever, spring, it doesn't matter. Like, we don't hold crypto, we buy it mark to market. But I do watch what happens with the waterfall of funds after they've been paid. Some of them sit with it, and some of them did very well. It's 30% worth more. It deals at Christmas that, were then worth more. Some of them, they don't care. They expect there's going to be a hit. They factor that in. They factor in the washing and laundering that may have a cost of 10 or 20%. They've got to off-ramp this stuff somewhere. It's getting harder and harder to do. So the answer is demands are getting higher, but the ability to get the funds out into fiat is harder. There are times where we have visibly moved the market with some of the trades we've had to do. Like, I did a $30 million deal, we transferred it, and then half an hour later it was worth 2.5% less. An hour later it was worth 4.8% less. That was like $2 million difference. But they don't care because the next day was up, so they're gonna play that curve.
I think it's more human driven. Like, bank robbers don't go if the gold price is high, right? They need money, they want money, they can make money, they go for it. I think that's more it.
I think there's another question. Great.
Thanks, everyone. Just a question, curious, what would drive an organization? I particularly come from an education background, education organization. What would drive an organization to pay heed to the demand, even if the backup is there, valid backup? And is it just the reputation cost, or something else that they are fearing? And I believe the client may be overruling, or may have the final decision, do we pay or pay out?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, I can take that. So again, the pay or not to pay decision is sometimes, when we're doing incident preparedness for clients, right? That's one of the things that I always tell CEOs and boards to think about is, would you pay, right? Would you pay? a lot of times say, no, we don't want to support Putin or whatever. We will never do this. And then when you get hit, maybe sometimes there's, a change of heart. But it's good to think about these things, to say, okay, under what circumstances would we pay? When would we not pay? And what is it worth? And we, when I work, for example, with Jason on some of these cases, it's a constant checking, right? They might say, we don't want to pay, or we'll pay. You say, okay, for what, right? For what do you want to pay? Is it manufacturing? A few years ago, we had, more in my view, or my experience, manufacturers hit. So it was very quantifiable. Day one, you're down, losing 500 grand. Day two, you're down 500 grand, right? They'll ask the recovery team, how long till we get back to business? 14 days. Okay, 14 times 500. You do the math. Now then, sometimes you'll say, you know what? We're not going to pay. I'd rather pay, KPMG or Cypher, whoever, than paying these guys. So I'd rather, it's going to take us a few days, but we're okay. It's going to cost us this amount of money. We'd rather pay you. Now, to your question, why would you pay if you can get back up and running? I think it depends on the sector that you're in, depends on the volume of data, and it depends on what sort of blowback you're going to get, right? Say, okay, well, you know what? If you have, let's say you're a victim of this hack, and you think, you know what? The information that was taken wasn't great. We're just going to tell everybody about it. We're going to tell our customers. You'll have seen these notices before, your name, email address, and last 4 digits of your credit card number. We're compromised. We're sorry. If you have any issues, call us. Most people, how many of you have gotten a notice like this? Yeah, right?
Who signed up?
Yeah, who's that? Right?
That's
Like
where
you're not going to be too worried about it. Now, I have seen cases where you are very, very concerned when it comes to health information, sometimes with employees. Sometimes there's issues that, and then, working with insurers, you try to tease out, okay, what are you, if there is insurance, why are you paying, right? Why do you want to pay? What's the data? Sometimes you do not know the data because the forensic team like, well, maybe they have it, maybe they don't. And then you say, okay, worst case scenario. That's what I would say, worst case scenario. You might find out there's another issue, like a union, right? Maybe the union members don't care so much, but maybe the union cares. And all of a sudden you say, okay, well, we can't have this data leaked. Or it can also happen that you fear a class action lawsuit. So millions and millions and millions of impacted individuals, low sensitivity data might still push you to say, we want to keep this quiet. Or you might have just a few, but very, very sensitive data, right? Highly sensitive data. You can imagine senior executives with health issues that don't want to come to light. And so there's different reasons, but they're usually related to reputational, class action risk, privacy risk.
And just to add to that is, what does insurance perspective have? Like, do they support these ransom payments and so on?
So there's a bunch of different ways of looking at this, and it's case by case, right? As you mentioned, there's the financial aspect of it, business interruption. If you're going to be losing $2-3 million a day, that's one aspect of it. Second aspect of it is, from a technological point of view, do you have the ability to get back up and running? How are your backups? How long is that process going to take? That's a huge factor as well. I mean, if you have backups and you can recover in a good amount of time, I would always recommend doing that over making or facilitating a payment. Obviously, if we're talking about 2-3 months of business interruption loss, that's a different story. From an insurance perspective, we do help facilitate payments. That's something that is built into our policies. However, there's a long list of things that needs to happen before that process goes through. There's also different sanction lists. So depending on the threat actor, we might not even be able to negotiate with them. Same with Jason's team. They're not able to negotiate with the various sanctions. So short answer is yes, we can help facilitate payments. Long answer is there's a big process that needs to go on before that point. Huge due diligence process from our point of view, looking at things like your backups, right? You told us you had backups, and now your backups are encrypted, but you told us they were offline. So then it becomes a bit of a claims issue. So it's super complicated in case-by-case basis.
Now, just one thing I wanted to add on that is that making a payment and then not having that data released, right, publicly or on the dark web, does not get you out of potentially reporting that if it's a reportable breach. And I think that's a misnomer. See, some people, even in the legal community, sometimes saying, and that's just not. That's not correct. That's not how the privacy commissioners look at it. I mean, you can read that yourself. You go on the OIPC website. It's very clear that that's not going to get you out of reporting, usually, okay? Now, will a court maybe, depending on the judge, right? Who knows what a judge is going to do? But will a court potentially say, well, if you made a payment, you did something to take additional steps to protect that, and will that show that you weren't negligent or something like that? Maybe. We don't have a lot of those cases out there yet, but it's not a get out of jail free card. I think it's more of a reputational sort of play. And on the incident preparedness side, I always say, mentioning the OFAC or sanctions lists, what if the worst case scenario happened because you were not able to pay? Because if you're on a boycotted list or sanctioned list or whatever else, you cannot make that payment, especially if you have to deal with the U.S. You do not want to deal with that regulator. You just don't. And it's very cut and dry. It's black and white. There is no gray. So what do you do then? Your most valuable assets are thrown up, on the internet, and how do you deal with that? Because you can never ultimately say, we will pay to protect. You might not be able to. Right?
No, there's a question there, so go ahead.
A lot of insight, thank you. So do you have more insight into ransomware as a service? So before you mentioned that there's toolkits online that's provided by these APT groups, but how is the service charged? Is it like they take a cut out of it, or
You're really
the flat
curious.
fee?
How do I get into this? I don't know about this.
That's a good
have a
question.
friend.
Good question. Good
I'm
question.
curious, yeah.
I like that.
Okay, so just like your Tim Hortons franchise, you've got a franchisor and you've got a franchisee. Franchisor is the operator, provides all the software, the back end, the infrastructure, the shame site, the leaks blog, the malware you're going to deploy, the reputation they've built that's going to scare people, and they're going to give you some training. I'll use Lockbit, just keep on that one. So they're, again, one of the most active. They have 100 different affiliates, so call them franchisees. They pay the Lockbit operator 20% of what they demand. They're allowed to set their own prices. They have certain rules, like if they agree to provide a decryptor and to delete the data that they stole, they must honor that and whatever else they may have said in the chat room. They've got different tools that are available to them that the Lockbit operator provides, and they're constantly improving their code, and they're still looking for more coders to fix their platform. So you're basically in a franchise model. But these affiliates work on many different ransomware as a service models. You could have a group that one day hits and comes out under the banner of Lockbit, but tomorrow they could be Black Basta, they could be Black Cat Alpha, names that I'm embarrassed to say on a daily basis, Clop and things like that. Clop's more of a command and control, so mob style. But basically, they're setting out the rules. The affiliate rules are posted. They just had a general meeting about their rules. They've set new terms and conditions for the young affiliates who may not have their own, arsenal of money, so they're more apt to give bigger discounts. They said, we're not doing this anymore. You're not allowed to discount more than 50%, and here are the pricing terms. You can work within a certain realm, but you can't go off the franchise models.
So I should mention one thing. You might know this, but this is, these actors, there are, in Canada, so these are criminal code offenses, right? And so it's not, a lot of times law enforcement has their hands tied because the location of some of these threat actors, are in countries that aren't necessarily, pursuing these threat actors. But that's not always the case. We've had some prominent, actually with the help of, for example, Peel District Police and others, where there's an international sort of collaboration, Interpol, FBI, local detachments, and there's a prominent case of a gentleman in Canada, and
in Newmarket, 20 minutes north of where I live, he was a Lockbit affiliate. They caught him in his garage and they seized his computers.
So they're serious offenses, which I think by now most people understand. But maybe not every 16-year-old, but they're not necessarily.
Just want to add to your question. I think we might also see a little bit more of the script kiddies come back and the lone wolves with ChatGPT. I think you guys did some tests with that, right? So
Yeah, we wrote some malware. We just asked the AI to, develop something that encrypts and decrypts and gives us a code and locks all the data, and boom.
Also called as
We
prompt
didn't
engineering.
test it.
Nicholas, I want to come back to you. We talked about uninsured and insureds. Do you see a lot of organizations who come to you to want to reinsure getting denied insurance, or what are some of the protocols they should maybe follow?
So we have a pretty standardized process. We have an application that you have to go through. The application has some pretty standard questions based on technical things, backups, MFA implementation. Do you have a privileged access management tool in place? It's a long list. Generally speaking, if you're a company with good security posture and you have backups in a good place, you'll likely be in a good place to get cyber insurance. Now, depending on your limits and things like that, that'll depends on a bunch of specifics. If you're declined cyber insurance or you can't be insured by us, I think there's some bigger problems at hand, because in the event that you do get hit with the ransomware, you not only don't have the systems in place, you don't have the backups to get back up and running. Now you don't have insurance to help you out of that boat that you're in now. So we're seeing a lot more clients come to us for insurance. If they do get denied or they don't get coverage, we see other companies coming in, for instance, KPMG, and getting them to a place where they're able to get that insurance, because it's super important. I read a stat a couple weeks ago that 60% of small businesses in Canada that got hit with the ransomware last year that didn't have cyber insurance went out of business 6 months later. So we're talking, heavy importance on getting cyber insurance, whether you're a small mom and pop shop with revenues $1 million or, multi-country company that does $7-8 billion a year, right?
Yeah, and understand what that policy is giving you. If you're small, medium enterprise, your demand could be $250,000 to $500,000 of ransom, just extortion, let alone the cost of all the advisors in the room and the restoration and the downtime. About 60% of our clients have cyber insurance when they come to us. I'd say about 10 or 20% are self-insured, but these are very large companies who have the ability to self-insure, and their limits, that's the amount of money that they have to pay before they may have cyber kicks in, could be anywhere from $10 to $25 million. And we've hit those limits on some cases.
One thing to note too is, cyber insurance differs from auto insurance. So auto insurance has stayed the same for the past 50 years. There was the invention of the seatbelt. There was the invention of, ABS, brakes. Other than that, it stayed pretty standard for the past, 50, 60 years. With cyber insurance, there's new threat vectors every week. There's new technology every week. So it's a bit more of a dynamic process, right? This year our application might look a little bit different than next year based on the forensic findings that we've had from the year, which I think is important too, because you want to remain standardized with what's happening in the world. You don't
Well, then the standards go up too, right?
Standards go up.
I mean, a few years ago, if you said, MFA, now if you say you don't have MFA, it's like, come on, right?
Yeah, MFA should be a baseline 100%. That's pretty simple. But now you're looking at things where you have MFA bypass. So is that as important as we thought it was 2 years ago? Maybe there's a new aspect that's more important, right? So it's a constantly changing landscape with cyber insurance. But it's incredibly important to have.
And you mentioned the forensic result, investigations, and oftentimes us investigators, we can't even find any data because there is no logs or the log retention isn't there, right? So make sure that you log, you detect, and you keep the logs more than 3 months or 30 days, so we can actually go in and find out what happened. So because that is valuable data, not only for you and the case, but also when it gets aggregated, on the insurance level.
So I just want a quick time check. We're about 6 minutes left, and we have 3 questions.
Sure.
So we want to first one, quick.
You guys are in demand.
Yeah, right there. Okay.
So some of the answers have gone into this since it came to my mind, but you've touched on a lot through some of the answers, especially on the legal side, about this move to double extortion, both not only the ransomware, the environment, and encrypt it, but take all the data first, or I think maybe exclusively take the data sometimes now. How is that, I'd be curious to know how that's impacting the insurance perspective. How do you handle that? It's not just about having backups now, it's about this a leak of the company's secrets or privacy breaches,
Yeah,
and also
exactly.
how that impacts the negotiation and the IR side as well.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So we offer those services, right? So our services aren't exclusive to technical services. So, if you get hit with a ransomware, we're not coming in solely to do forensic work. We're also there with a breach coach. We're also there with negotiators. We also have various notification services available. So if breach coach comes to us and says, listen, 10,000 employee documents have been leaked, we got to notify. We have those notification services available through Equifax and in different companies. We also offer communication services. So if it comes public media knowledge, then we have that ability to offer some PR services as well. So it's not exclusive to just technical. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to ask two questions, 1A and 1B. 1A is that if all the details that the insurance company, the cyber insurance company is looking for is available, what is the the time frame or the SLA to get the claim?
So you're speaking specifically if you have a claim, how long until we end up working on that claim?
When all the forensic data, logs, everything are
Very
available.
quickly. So
How long is very quickly, sir?
So if you say your company gets hit with a ransomware right now, we would be on the phone with KPMG or another forensic provider, basically within the hour, to get a scoping call going. From that scoping call, we're going to set up the team, figure out where we need to go. But the forensics at that point can take weeks, months. But we work quickly. We can work as quick as you do, right? So if you come to us and it's 5 p.m. on a Friday and you say, hey, we've been hit with ransomware, we'll be on a call 6, 7 p.m. on the Friday. We'll be working by no later than Saturday.
Yes, that is starting the work, sir, but that is not reimbursing the company.
Oh, you're talking about getting reimbursed for the cost? Oh, that happens later. That's a claims issue. It's going to go through a whole claims process to figure out what exactly is covered based on your policy.
1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, 1 year?
It's case by case, right? If you're talking a small BEC,
The fastest.
The fastest? Oh, now we're getting specific.
Hot seat.
Weeks. We'll say weeks. How about that?
All right. I won't pressure you further. Question 2A.
Sorry, go ahead.
Question 2A. What exactly am I trying to protect if I'm paying for cyber security insurance? Hold on, sir. I'm just painting a question. I'm just painting. If somebody has stolen my car, the person calling me that, oh, your car is now in the United States. I have your car. If you can send, the car is worth $70,000. If you can pay me $10,000, I will abandon your car at the grocery store in Edmonton, pick it up. If you can send Bitcoin on. But even though if I send that money, what's the guarantee? Is it 100% guarantee that the guy will return the car? Is it 100% guarantee that the ransomware guy will decrypt the thing and will have my data back? That's the question, sir.
Maybe that's more for Jason.
Yeah, in all the cases where we've negotiated a settlement, 100% of the times we've received decryptors. But to my colleague's points earlier, it may not be as effective in the data validation recovery. So your car may be smashed, keyed, stereo's gone. You got a car, but is it worthwhile to you? The other question I think you're asking is, oh shit, I forgot.
It's the data leakage.
Oh, data leakage. Yeah, so you have to think about, it's a business case. Is that going to impact you? And what happens if the data gets out if you don't make a deal? And the question really I think you're asking me is credibility and integrity and honor amongst the thieves. And we are engaging with them either on their past reputations, which I don't always believe, because there's different affiliates on each platform, right? And we're trying to assess whether or not they're going to have the methodology of all the other threat actor groups, and if we think they're going to deliver in how they're proving and working it through. If we have high risk, we may tell you don't pay at all, and there's a high risk you're going to be re-extorted, or the data is going to be leaked anyway.
What you're paying, sorry, your car analogy, it's a little bit like this. Your car's gone. Let's say it's your mom's car. You might be paying for mom not to find out you stole her car. You know what I mean? It's somebody may have seen you, but at least mom isn't finding out right away. I've never done that, but I'm just saying.
You got to turn the odometer backwards.
I know there's one more question, so.
Sorry, thank you so much. My last question is basically, so when a payment is made, do you guys track the payment afterwards on crypto exchanges? And when do law enforcement get involved if you're able to track it and you're able to find the actor and whatnot? And do funds get retrieved? Thank you.
Okay, so we have to run compliance checks on all the indicia available to us, the name of the group, the wallet, the indicators of compromise the forensics teams would have found. We have to get a comfort that we've done a risk-based due diligence approach. So prior to a settlement, usually the wallets are clean. There's no activity. It's a fresh wallet if they're smart. Sometimes we have really dumb criminals that have sanctioned activity we can't pay. Once it's been paid, our obligation is gone in terms of what's happening on the wallet, but there's another obligation because I'm a money service business registered under FinCEN in the US, FinTrack in Canada, that we have to file a suspicious transaction report or a suspicious activity report. So in the US, for example, the SARS will get reported, the nature of the crime, the threat actor group, the wallet, the demand, how much it was settled, but the client's name is obfuscated because a lot of what we do is under privilege and confidentiality agreements with our counsel. Law enforcement, if there's a cyber policy, will likely be informed at the beginning because it's really the only defense you had. You went and you talked to the FBI, you asked them if they had any other indicia, anything we should be aware about that could be funding a nation state, threat actor, or sanctioned entity. And if everything is cool, then you're going to make that payment, but in return, they're going to want like an IC3 report, or the ICMP has their own reports, that we as literally the guys inside the crime scene collecting the evidence would give through counsel, so our transcripts, the wallet, our OFAC compliance report, counsel will decide if they want and how they're going to work with law enforcement globally.
Thank you. I know we are almost at time, so just a quick closing thought from everyone. Do's and don'ts in event of a ransomware if it comes to forensics.
I already set mine, like detection, logging, and keeping the logs.
Good quality logs.
Yeah, one thing too is we often see, companies get hit with ransomware. The first thing they try to do is get backups up and running. Those backups end up being encrypted. Wait for the, I know you have in-house IT and cybersecurity teams, but wait for the forensic team to come in with their expertise and before you try to start restoring things right away. We've seen it quite often where things go south when that happens. So,
yeah, hire a professional. These people in the room have seen it before. You can't just learn it on YouTube. We've done thousands and thousands of engagements with threat actors. There's things that we do and how we start to try and get the best result for clients.
Don't go to the Tor link yourself.
Yeah, don't click on that Tor link because it's going to start a clock, and then I'm trying to beg for time when we didn't need to be that anxious at the beginning. It actually gives us a weaker position when you jump immediately to without having spoken to everybody. You want to make sure that your environment is hardened and protected. You want your forensics teams to make sure that they're not still in there. They can't do more damage. They can't continue to encrypt or steal data. You want to validate prior to an event where your data was. Make sure you have least permissions. Make sure you've got immutable backups. Make sure you don't keep your insurance policy on the file server they attacked because they're going to hold that up and go, oh, you got $10 million of cyber insurance. And they're going to go, why are you telling them you have cyber? Just be vigilant.
Yeah, generally, I think most victims probably have a little bit more time than they think. So there's a risk to being, trying to brush things under the rug, but there's also a risk in trying to be overly transparent. And by that I mean you're hacked, and then you want to go out. And I've had cases where people will post, or a CEO will post to their Facebook or send emails to their key customers. We have been hacked. That's not what you want to do. You might have to do that, okay, depending on the situation, but you don't have enough information at that point to really make anything more than, what people call a holding statement or something that's quite, generic. That is usually the right call, and you might not have to make that call right away. So I think that's another important learning.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. I think we are at time, so thank you very much for engaging.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.